The October wind bit through Victoria's scrubs as she climbed the worn steps, her nursing bag heavy on her shoulder. The brownstone looked tired, paint peeling like old skin, but the potted violet in her hand gave her something to focus on besides her nerves. 3rd floor. Apartment 3B. She knocked, and the door opened to reveal Margaret Hayes, silver hair swept into an elegant bun, eyes bright with warmth that Victoria hadn't expected. "You must be Victoria." "I brought you this," Victoria said, offering the violet. "A welcome gift." Margaret's hands trembled as she took it. "My husband grew these before he passed." The apartment was nothing like the building outside. Sunlight poured through tall windows, illuminating watercolors on cream walls, books stacked everywhere, furniture that whispered of better times. Victoria recognized it immediately. Old money, worn thin. Over the following weeks, Margaret became more than a client. She was sharp, opinionated, fascinating. She spoke of traveling through Europe with her husband, of raising children who had scattered like autumn leaves, of a life lived fully despite its losses. "Tell me about yourself," Margaret said one afternoon, teacup balanced on her knee. "Not the nurse. The woman." Victoria smiled. "There's not much to tell. Ohio girl, came here for nursing school, stayed for the energy. I have a cat named Winston and volunteer at the community garden. No one special. No time. Between patients and volunteering, I barely sleep." Margaret's eyes gleamed. "Love finds us when we stop looking." The knock came on a Thursday, sharp and unexpected. Margaret's face shifted, something like worry crossing her features. "I wasn't expecting anyone." The man in the doorway stole the air from Victoria's lungs. Tall, dark hair disheveled, suit expensive but loosened at the collar. His eyes were storm gray, currently fixed on Margaret with concern that creased his forehead. "Grandmother, why didn't you tell me you weren't feeling well?" "Jackson, don't be dramatic. It was a dizzy spell." His gaze shifted to Victoria, and she felt it like electricity on her skin. She was suddenly aware of her plain scrubs, her practical ponytail, how small she must seem in this moment. "You must be the nurse. Victoria Monroe. Your grandmother is doing well." The dizzy spell was just a medication adjustment. He studied her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "I appreciate you taking care of her." The words felt weighted with something more. "Jackson, join us for tea," Margaret said, barely hiding her smile. Victoria was just about to make a fresh pot. "I should go. Other appointments. Your next one isn't for 2 hours. You told me so yourself." Trapped, Victoria retreated to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she prepared the tea. Through the doorway, she heard their voices, low and intimate, words she couldn't quite catch. When she returned, Jackson had shed his jacket, sleeves rolled up. Less intimidating. More dangerous. As she poured, his eyes never left her. "Victoria has been wonderful," Margaret said. "She reminds me of myself at that age." Jackson's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire body went rigid. "I need to take this." He stood, walked to the window, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I told you not to contact me here." Victoria caught fragments. "The board meeting. She doesn't know. Keep it that way." When he turned back, his face was a mask, but his eyes burned with something Victoria couldn't name. "I'm sorry. I have to go." He grabbed his jacket, then paused at the door, looking back at her. "Will you be here next week? Tuesday and Thursday?" He nodded once, then left, the door clicking shut with finality. Margaret watched Victoria with knowing eyes. "My grandson is complicated. But he's a good man, under all that armor." "It's none of my business," Victoria said, gathering the teacups, trying to ignore the way her pulse still raced. "Isn't it?" Margaret's smile was enigmatic. I think it will be. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She kept seeing those storm-gray eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. Her phone lit up at 2 a.m. Unknown number. The text was simple: "This is Jackson Hayes. I need to see you. Alone. Tomorrow night. I'll explain everything." Victoria stared at the screen, her heart hammering. She should delete it. Should report it to the agency. Should maintain professional boundaries. Instead, she typed, "Where?" The restaurant was the kind Victoria had only seen in magazines. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters who moved like dancers. She felt exposed in her simple dress, the only nice one she owned, aware of every eye that turned as the host led her through the dining room. Jackson sat at a corner table, already watching her approach. He stood, and she noticed he looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You came. You said you'd explain everything." Victoria sat, folding her hands to hide their trembling. "So explain." He poured her wine without asking, his movements controlled. "My grandmother is dying." The words hit like a fist. "What?" "No, her vitals are stable, her condition is manageable. She has 6 months. Maybe less." His jaw clenched. "She doesn't want you to know. Made the doctors swear. But I need you to understand why I'm about to ask you something impossible." Victoria's throat tightened. "What are you asking?" Jackson leaned forward, and in the candlelight, she saw the desperation he'd been hiding. "My grandmother's greatest wish is to see me settled. Happy. In love." He laughed, bitter. "She thinks I'm too focused on business. Too closed off. She's not wrong. I still don't understand. I'm asking you to pretend to be my girlfriend." The room seemed to tilt. "You're insane." "Probably." He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture she was starting to recognize as frustration. "But she adores you. She talks about you constantly. And the way she looked at us that day, like she was already planning the wedding." His voice cracked. "I can't give her much, Victoria. But I can give her this. One last happiness before she goes." "This is insane," Victoria repeated, but her conviction wavered. She thought of Margaret's warmth, her sharp wit, the way she'd looked at that violet like it was made of gold. "You want me to lie to a dying woman? I want you to give her peace." Jackson's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. "Please. Name your price. Anything. I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. "I want to help her," Victoria said finally. "Not you. Her. Because she deserves to be happy, whatever time she has left." Something shifted in Jackson's expression. Relief, maybe. Or respect. "Thank you. One condition. We tell her the truth. Eventually. Before the end." He nodded, though his eyes said he was lying. The next Tuesday, Victoria arrived at Margaret's with Jackson beside her, his hand warm at the small of her back. The touch felt electric, too real for pretend. Margaret opened the door and froze, her gaze moving between them, landing on their intertwined fingers. "Grandmother," Jackson said softly. "Victoria and I have something to tell you." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my darlings." The joy on her face made Victoria's chest ache with guilt. Over the following weeks, the lines blurred. Jackson would arrive as Victoria was leaving, would walk her to her car, would text her goodnight messages that felt less like performance and more like truth. They'd have dinner with Margaret, and Victoria would catch herself laughing at his dry humor, leaning into his touch without thinking. "You're good at this," she told him one night, standing in the hallway outside Margaret's apartment. At what? Pretending. Jackson stepped closer, his voice dropping. Is that what we're doing? Her breath caught. Isn't it? He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering. I don't know anymore. The kiss happened without decision. One moment they were staring at each other, the next his mouth was on hers, desperate and demanding, and she was kissing him back like her life depended on it. Her back hit the wall, his body pressing against hers, hands tangling in her hair. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria whispered, "This is a mistake." Probably. He kissed her again, softer this time. But I've made worse. The phone call came at midnight. Victoria, it's Margaret. The older woman's voice was wrong, strained. Something's happened. Jackson's in the hospital. Car accident. They say it's bad. Victoria was in her car before Margaret finished explaining, her heart in her throat, still tasting Jackson on her lips from hours before. The hospital was bright and cold. She found Margaret in the waiting room, looking small and fragile in a way Victoria had never seen. They won't tell me anything. Margaret clutched Victoria's hand. Because I'm not immediate family. But you're his girlfriend. They'll tell you. The lie had never felt heavier. Victoria approached the nurse's station, her professional voice steady despite the terror coursing through her. I'm here about Jackson Hayes. I'm his girlfriend. The nurse's expression was sympathetic. He's in surgery. The accident was severe. You should prepare yourself. 3 hours later, a doctor emerged, face grave. Ms. Monroe? Mr. Hayes is stable, but he's asking for you. He says it's urgent. Victoria followed, leaving Margaret in the waiting room, guilt and relief warring in her chest. Jackson looked pale against the white sheets, bandages across his ribs, and 4 in his arm. But his eyes were clear, intense as ever. You came. Of course I came. She took his hand, and he gripped it like a lifeline. The accident wasn't an accident. His voice was low, urgent. My business partner. He found out about the merger I've been planning. He's been sabotaging me for months. The brakes on my car were cut. Jackson, that's attempted murder. You need to call the police. I can't. He has evidence. Fabricated, but convincing. He'll use it to destroy everything I've built. Everything my grandmother's husband built. He pulled her closer. Victoria, I need you to do something for me. Something dangerous. What? His eyes burned into hers. I need you to get into his office. Find the real evidence. You're a nurse. No one would suspect you. You could say you're delivering medical supplies, checking on his elderly mother, anything. You're asking me to break the law. I'm asking you to save my life. His grip tightened. Please. I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. Victoria looked at this man who'd come into her life like a storm, who'd asked her to lie for love, who'd kissed her like she mattered. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. His relief was palpable. Thank you. God, Victoria, thank you. She leaned down, pressed her forehead to his. Don't make me regret this. But as she left his room, passing Margaret in the hallway, seeing the trust in the older woman's eyes, Victoria had the sinking feeling that regret was already waiting for her. The address Jackson gave her led to a sleek office building downtown. His partner's name was Richard Chen, and according to Jackson, his mother had hired a home care nurse last month. Victoria wore her scrubs, carried her nursing bag, walked through the lobby like she belonged. I'm here to check on Mrs. Chen, she told security. Regular visit. They waved her through. Richard Chen's office was on the 10th floor, locked but not alarmed. Victoria's hands shook as she picked the lock, a skill she'd learned from a misspent youth she'd never told anyone about. Inside, she found the files exactly where Jackson said they'd be. But as she photographed the documents, she found something else. An email chain. Between Jackson and a woman named Melissa. The nurse is perfect. She'll never suspect. Keep the grandmother convinced. Once the old woman's inheritance clears, we split it and disappear. Victoria's blood turned to ice. Are you sure she'll go through with the break-in? What if she realizes it's a setup? She won't. She's too naive. Too trusting. God, this is almost too easy. The door opened behind her. Hello, Victoria, Jackson said, leaning against the frame, perfectly healthy, no bandages in sight. Looking for something? Victoria's world narrowed to Jackson's face, unmarked, unbandaged, perfectly fine. Behind him, a woman appeared. Tall, elegant, blonde. Smiling like a shark. You must be the nurse, the woman said. Melissa. It had to be Melissa. Jackson's told me so much about you. What is this? Victoria's voice came out steady, cold. She was good in a crisis. Always had been. Jackson stepped into the office, closing the door. It's exactly what it looks like. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect you to be quite so efficient at breaking and entering. Where'd you learn that? Answer me. My grandmother is dying. That part's true. He moved closer, and Victoria fought the urge to back away. But the inheritance doesn't go to me. It goes to a trust. One I can't touch unless I'm married. Happily. For at least 6 months. Understanding crashed over her like cold water. You were going to marry me. Melissa corrected, examining her nails. He was going to marry you, I was going to play the jilted ex, lots of drama for grandmother to witness. True love conquering all. Very touching. Then 6 months later, a tragic accident. Jackson's voice was casual, discussing murder like a dinner menu. Margaret sees you happy. Dies in peace. I inherit. We split the money 3 ways. Richard gets his cut for playing along. There is no Richard Chin, is there? Victoria's mind raced. This is his office. But the mother, the nurse. Hired actors. The hospital, though, that was real. Well, the building. We rented a closed wing. Jackson tilted his head, studying her. The kiss was a nice touch. Very convincing. I almost believed you felt something. Victoria's hand moved to her bag, fingers closing around the small canister inside. Pepper spray. She never went anywhere without it. Here's the problem with your plan, she said quietly. I recorded everything on my phone. Every conversation. Including the one where you confessed to planning Margaret's daughter's accident 5 years ago to speed up the inheritance. The room went silent. I never said that, Jackson's voice was steel. Didn't you? Victoria pulled out her phone, hit play. Jackson's voice filled the room. After I took care of her daughter, I thought this would be easier. But the old woman's tougher than she looks. It was a fabrication, audio she'd pieced together from their conversations using a free app, barely convincing if you listened closely. But in the moment, in the shock, it was enough. Melissa turned to Jackson, her face white. You killed her daughter? You said it was an accident. You promised me. Don't be stupid. Jackson lunged for Victoria. She sprayed him directly in the face. He went down screaming, clawing at his eyes. Melissa backed against the wall, and Victoria ran, her legs pumping, the phone clutched in her hand. She made it to the elevator, hit the button frantically. Behind her, she heard Jackson's roar, Melissa's shouts. The doors opened. Margaret stood inside. Hello, dear, the older woman said calmly. I think we need to talk. Victoria stumbled backward, but Margaret's hand shot out, surprisingly strong, pulling her into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing them in. "You knew," Victoria whispered. "I suspected. Jackson's been different since his father died. Angry. Desperate." Margaret's eyes were sad but clear. "The inheritance he mentioned? It doesn't exist. I spent it all years ago. Medical bills. Bad investments. There's nothing left but the apartment." "Then why?" "I wanted to see who he'd become. If there was anything of the boy I raised left in him." Margaret pressed the button for the ground floor. "And I wanted to test you." "Test me?" "You could have taken the money, Victoria. Could have played along. But you recorded him instead. Protected yourself. Protected me, even though you thought I was a mark." Margaret smiled, thin and tired. "You're a good person. Rare, these days." The elevator descended, and Victoria's mind spun. "We need to call the police. He confessed to killing your daughter. He didn't kill Catherine. She died of cancer, peacefully, with me holding her hand." Margaret's voice was gentle. "But he thinks he got away with something. Let him think it a while longer." "I don't understand. Jackson has been stealing from his own company. Small amounts. Covering his tracks. He thinks I don't know, but I have friends. People who watch out for me." Margaret pulled an envelope from her coat. "These are the real documents. Proof of embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. Enough to put him away for 20 years. Victoria stared at the envelope. "You set this up?" "All of it. I gave him a chance to be better. He chose this." Margaret's hand trembled as she held out the envelope. "The question is, what will you choose?" The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. Through the glass doors, Victoria could see police cars pulling up, lights flashing. "You called them," she said. "I called them the moment you walked into that office. They've been listening to everything." Margaret stepped out of the elevator, then looked back. "I'm sorry I used you, Victoria. But I needed someone I could trust. Someone honest. Someone who'd do the right thing, even when it cost them." Upstairs, Victoria could hear shouting, crashes. Jackson, desperate. Trapped. She thought of his kiss, the way her heart had raced, the lies wrapped in touches that felt real. "He'll blame me," she said quietly. "When this is over. He'll say I entrapped him." "Probably." Margaret took Victoria's hand. "But I'll be there. Every step." "And Victoria?" "There's no inheritance. But there is a trust. A real one. For nurses who give a damn. I'm leaving it all to you. I don't want your money. I know. That's why you're getting it." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Use it well. Help others like you helped me." The police entered the building, moving past them toward the elevators. A detective stopped, showed Margaret his badge. "Mrs. Hayes? We're ready for your statement." Margaret nodded, then looked at Victoria one last time. "Will you stay? I need someone I trust beside me." Victoria thought of her tiny apartment, her cat, her simple life. Thought of Jackson's storm-gray eyes and the lies they'd held. Thought of doing the right thing, even when it hurt. "Yes," she said. "I'll stay." But as they walked toward the detective, Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think this is over? You just made it personal. Watch your back, nurse. This is far from finished." She looked up at the 10th floor, saw a figure in the window. Not Jackson. Someone else. Someone she'd never seen before, watching with eyes that promised violence. Victoria's blood turned cold. "Margaret," she whispered. I think we have a problem. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Victoria sat in a gray room, giving her statement for the third time, her voice mechanical. Across the building, Jackson was being processed. She'd heard him screaming her name, promising revenge. Margaret sat beside her, smaller somehow, the energy that had animated her draining with each passing hour. Mrs. Hayes needs rest, Victoria told the detective. She's not well. Just a few more questions. The door burst open. A man strode in, expensive suit, cold eyes. Behind him, lawyers in matching navy. My client will not be answering any more questions without counsel present. He looked at Margaret with something like contempt. Mrs. Hayes, I'm Robert Carlyle. Your grandson retained my services. For himself, I assume, Margaret said dryly. For you. He's concerned about your diminished capacity. The medications you're taking. The diagnosis you've been hiding from the family. Victoria stood. Get out. Sit down, Ms. Monroe. You're in enough trouble already. Carlyle dropped a folder on the table. Breaking and entering. Conspiracy. Evidence tampering. And that's just the start. My investigators have been very thorough. Victoria opened the folder. Her breath stopped. Photos. Her, entering Richard Chen's office. Her, with the lockpick. Her, photographing documents. And others. Earlier photos. Her at Margaret's apartment. Her and Jackson, kissing in the hallway. The way we see it, Carlyle continued, you seduced my client. Manipulated an elderly woman for her money. When Mr. Hayes discovered your scheme, you fabricated evidence to frame him. That's insane. Is it? Because right now, the only actual crime we can prove is yours. Jackson Hayes was never in that hospital. Never confessed to anything. Your recording? Inadmissible. Edited. Fake. Carlyle smiled, sharp. But you're breaking and entering? That's on camera. Margaret's hand found Victoria's under the table, squeezing hard. The detective looked uncomfortable. Mr. Carlyle, we have Mrs. Hayes's testimony. From a dying woman on heavy medication. A woman whose own grandson will testify she's been confused. Paranoid. Delusional. Carlyle leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Ms. Monroe will confess. Take full responsibility. In exchange, we won't press charges that could put her away for 10 years. She'll lose her nursing license, of course. But she'll be free. And if I don't? Victoria's voice was steady, cold. Then we bury you. And Mrs. Hayes testifies that you coerced her. Threatened her. An elderly, sick woman manipulated by her caregiver. Carlyle's smile widened. Either way, Jackson walks. The question is whether you go down alone, or take Mrs. Hayes with you. The room tilted. Victoria looked at Margaret, saw the fear in her eyes, the exhaustion. The woman had weeks, maybe days. And Victoria was supposed to let her spend them fighting this battle? I need to speak with Mrs. Hayes. Alone. Carlyle laughed. Not a chance. 5 minutes. Or I start talking to reporters about how your client tried to defraud a dying woman. The detective nodded. 5 minutes. When the room cleared, Victoria turned to Margaret. He's winning. No. We have the truth. Truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. Victoria took Margaret's hands, papery and cold. You need to let me do this. Confess. Take the blame. You'll be safe. Absolutely not. Margaret, please. You're dying. I'm not letting you spend your last days in court, being torn apart by lawyers. I won't. You'll lose everything. I don't have much to lose. Victoria smiled, though it hurt. But you? You deserve peace. Dignity. Time with people who love you. You're one of those people, Margaret whispered. I know. That's why I'm doing this. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. There has to be another way. There isn't. Victoria stood, walked to the door, knocked. When the detective entered, she said clearly, I want to confess. The statement took hours. She lied with every word, crafting a story of greed and manipulation. She'd planned it all. Seduced Jackson. Manipulated Margaret. It was all her. Carlyle watched with satisfaction. The detective looked skeptical but took notes. When it was done, Victoria signed the papers that ended her career. Her freedom. Her future. We'll be in touch about sentencing, the detective said quietly. For what it's worth, I don't believe a word of this. Doesn't matter what you believe. Matters what you can prove. They let her go that night. House arrest, ankle monitor, trial pending. As she walked out of the station, Margaret was waiting on a bench, looking ancient in the harsh streetlights. You shouldn't be here, Victoria said. Where else would I be? Margaret stood shakily. Victoria, I'm not going to let you do this. It's done. Then I'll undo it. I'll tell them the truth. They won't believe you. Carlyle will destroy you. Victoria's voice broke. Please, Margaret. Let me save you. It's the only thing I can do. They stood in the cold night air, two women who'd found each other by chance and held on through everything. Come home with me, Margaret said finally. While you still can. While we still have time. Victoria wanted to refuse. But the thought of her empty apartment, her cat with a neighbor, the walls closing in, it was too much. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Margaret's apartment felt like a sanctuary. She made tea while Victoria sat on the couch, staring at nothing. When Margaret returned, she settled beside her, pressing a warm cup into her hands. I have something to tell you, Margaret said. Something I should have told you from the start. More secrets? One more. The biggest one. Margaret took a breath. Jackson is my grandson. But he's not my blood. He was adopted. After my daughter died, my son-in-law remarried. The new wife had a son. Jackson. And my son-in-law spent years convincing Jackson that my daughter's money should have been his. Victoria processed this. So this was never about your inheritance. No. It was about revenge. Control. Jackson believes I owe him everything. Margaret's hands shook around her cup. But what I'm trying to tell you is this. I have another grandchild. My daughter's biological son. He was raised by his father, far away from all this. He doesn't know about Jackson. Doesn't know about any of it. Why are you telling me this? Because he's coming here. I called him. Told him everything. Margaret met Victoria's eyes. His name is Daniel. And he's a lawyer. One of the best. He's going to fix this, Victoria. He's going to save you. Margaret, no. If Jackson finds out about him. Let him find out. Margaret's voice was steel. I've spent too long protecting Jackson. Hoping he'd change. But he won't. And I'm done watching good people suffer for his sins. The doorbell rang. They both froze. It's too soon, Margaret whispered. Daniel wasn't supposed to arrive until tomorrow. Victoria moved to the window, looked down at the street. Her blood turned to ice. Jackson stood at the building entrance, looking up. And beside him, the figure from the window. The stranger. In the stranger's hand, something caught the streetlight. A gun. Victoria grabbed Margaret, pulled her away from the window. We need to call the police. Now. But her phone was dead. And Margaret's landline, when Victoria picked it up, was silent. Cut. Footsteps in the hallway. Coming closer. The fire escape, Margaret said, moving faster than Victoria had seen her move in weeks. They made it to the window as the apartment door splintered open. Jackson stepped through, his face twisted with rage. Behind him, the stranger leveled the gun. "Hello, grandmother," Jackson said softly. "We need to have a family discussion." Victoria pushed Margaret behind her, putting her body between the gun and the woman who'd become more than a client. More than a friend. "Whatever you're planning, it's over," Victoria said, her voice steadier than her hands. "The police know everything." Jackson laughed, hollow. "The police think you're a criminal. My lawyer made sure of that." He nodded to the stranger. "Victoria, meet Thomas. My real brother. Not adopted. Not pretend. Blood." Thomas smiled, cold. "Pleasure." "When Carlyle said investigators, he meant me," Thomas continued, circling them. "I've been watching you for weeks. Every move. Every mistake." "Why?" Margaret's voice trembled. "Jackson, I gave you everything. Raised you. Loved you. You gave me nothing." Jackson's composure cracked. "Do you know what it was like? Being the adopted son? Watching you mourn your real daughter, knowing I'd never measure up? You spent 50 years grieving her. You never had room for me. That's not true. Isn't it? You left everything to her son. Daniel. The grandson you actually wanted." Jackson's face twisted. "Well, Daniel's not coming. Thomas made sure of that." Victoria's stomach dropped. "What did you do?" "Nothing permanent. Just delayed him. Gave us time." Jackson pulled out his phone, showed them a photo. A man bound to a chair in a dark room, tape over his mouth, eyes wide with fear. "He'll live. If you cooperate." "What do you want?" Victoria stepped forward. "Let Margaret go. Take me. Use me as leverage. Whatever you need." "Victoria, no," Margaret grabbed her arm. "Always the hero." Jackson pocketed the phone. "That's your problem. You actually care. It makes you weak. It makes me human. It makes you stupid." Thomas raised the gun, pointed it at Margaret. "Here's what's going to happen. Grandmother is going to sign a new will. Everything goes to Jackson. Then there's going to be a tragic accident. A break-in. The nurse tried to protect her patient. Didn't work out. No one will believe that," Victoria said, but fear crawled up her spine. "They will when we're done staging it. By the time we're finished, you'll be the villain and Jackson will be the grieving grandson." Thomas's finger moved to the trigger. "Last chance. Sign, or I start shooting." Margaret straightened, suddenly regal despite the terror in her eyes. "If you're going to kill us anyway, why would I sign anything?" "Because I'll make it quick for her." Jackson gestured to Victoria. "Refuse, and Thomas takes his time. We'll make you watch." Victoria met Margaret's eyes. Saw the apology there. The love. The regret. "It's okay," Victoria whispered. "Margaret, it's okay." "No, it's not." Margaret turned to Jackson, her voice breaking. "How did you become this? Where did I fail you? You failed me the day you took me in and never let me forget I wasn't really yours. I loved you. God help me, I still love you." For a moment, something flickered in Jackson's eyes. Pain. Longing. Then it hardened again. Too late for that. The window exploded inward. Glass rained down as a figure swung through on a rope, hitting Thomas hard. The gun went flying. Victoria lunged for it, but Jackson was faster, grabbing her around the throat, using her as a shield. The figure rolled to his feet. Young, mid-20s, with Margaret's eyes. "Hello, grandmother," Daniel said, breathing hard. "Sorry I'm late." Thomas groaned on the floor, struggling to rise. Daniel kicked him in the ribs, keeping him down. "How did you get free?" Jackson's arm tightened on Victoria's throat. She clawed at it, gasping. "I didn't. Your brother's not very bright. He hired cheap muscle. They're currently in police custody, singing everything they know." Daniel's eyes moved to Victoria, softening. "Let her go, Jackson. It's over." "Not even close." Jackson backed toward the door, dragging Victoria with him. "I'll kill her. I swear I will. Then you'll die in prison instead of disappearing like you planned." Daniel moved forward, hands up. "Think about it. You let her go, turn yourself in, maybe you get a deal. Maybe manslaughter instead of murder. You kill her. You're done." "I'm already done." Jackson's voice broke. "Don't you understand? There's nothing left." "There's always something left," Margaret said softly, stepping toward them. "Jackson, please. I'm so sorry. For every moment you felt unloved. For every time I made you feel less than. I was wrong. I was grieving, and I took a beautiful boy and made him feel like he wasn't enough. Stop. I should have told you every day. You were enough. You were mine. You were wanted." Tears streamed down Margaret's face. "I failed you. Not the other way around. Please, don't compound my mistakes with more violence. Let Victoria go. Let yourself be saved." Jackson's grip loosened, just slightly. Victoria felt his breath hitch against her neck. "It's too late," he whispered. "It's never too late." Margaret reached out, her hand trembling. "Come home, Jackson. Really home. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. As family. Real family." For a long moment, nothing moved. Victoria barely breathed. Then Jackson's arm fell away. She stumbled forward, gasping. Daniel caught her, pulled her away. Jackson stood there, empty, broken. "I don't know how." "You start by letting me help you." Margaret walked to him, took his face in her hands like he was a child. "You start by choosing to be better." The police arrived minutes later. Thomas was arrested first, screaming about lawyers. Jackson went quietly, looking back at Margaret with something like hope in his eyes. Daniel freed the real Daniel from Thomas's backup location. The lawyer was shaken but alive, and within hours, he dismantled Carlyle's case against Victoria. The confession was coerced. The evidence fabricated. By morning, Victoria's record was clear. But something had changed in her. She sat in Margaret's apartment 3 days later, the older woman across from her, looking frilier than ever. "How long?" Victoria asked. "Weeks. Maybe less." Margaret smiled. "But what a few weeks they've been. I'm sorry. For all of it. Don't be. You showed me something I needed to see. That there are still good people in the world. People worth fighting for." Margaret took her hand. "And you gave Jackson something I couldn't. A reason to change. He tried to kill us. He did. But in that moment, when I told him I loved him, I saw my grandson. The real one. Under all the anger and pain." Margaret's grip tightened. "He's going to prison. But Daniel is representing him. And I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure he knows he's loved." It might not save him. But it might save who he becomes after. Victoria nodded, throat tight. What about you? Margaret asked. What will you do now? I don't know. Nurse again, I suppose. Start over. Or. Margaret pulled out an envelope. You could do something bigger. Inside was a check. More money than Victoria had seen in her life. The trust one mentioned. It's real. And it's yours. Open a clinic. Help people who can't afford care. Be the person I wish I'd been. Margaret, I can't. You can. You will. Margaret stood, moved to the window, looked out at the city. We get so few chances to make things right, Victoria. Don't waste yours. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the lobby of the Monroe Community Health Center. The name had been Margaret's idea. In the last days before she'd passed peacefully in her sleep, Daniel and Jackson both at her bedside. Jackson was serving 5 years, reduced sentence for cooperation. But he wrote to Victoria sometimes. Short letters. Apologetic. Human. She wrote back. Forgiveness was a process, but she was trying. Daniel had become a friend. He stopped by the clinic sometimes, helped with legal issues for patients who needed it. And Thomas was serving 20 years. No early release. No appeals. The clinic doors opened, and a young mother entered with a sick child. Victoria smiled, grabbed her medical bag. Let's get you taken care of, she said gently. As she worked, she thought about Margaret. About second chances. About how love could wound and heal in equal measure. About how the right thing was rarely the easy thing, but it was always worth doing. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the city in white. Fresh starts. New beginnings. Victoria looked at her reflection in the window, saw someone stronger than the woman who'd climbed those brownstone steps months ago. Someone who'd been tested and hadn't broken. Someone who'd chosen kindness over safety, truth over convenience. Someone who'd learned that the hardest battles weren't against others, but against our own capacity to give up on people who needed saving. She turned back to her patient, to the work that mattered, to the life she'd built from ashes and grace. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that Margaret would be proud. The end.